the lost trail. I need to post this here because if I don't tell someone, I think the dread will finally swallow me whole. I went hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains last week, looking for a quiet escape from the noise of the city. I am an experienced hiker who knows these woods well, or at least I thought I did before this trip. I found a small, unmarked trail near the parking lot and decided to see where it led for an hour. The air was perfectly still, and the sun was shining through the thick canopy of ancient trees as I started walking. The trail was narrow, but clear enough for me to follow without needing to look at my map or compass. I felt a sense of peace as I stepped over mossy rocks and listened to the distant sound of a creek. Everything seemed normal for the first mile, just a typical beautiful day in the national park forest. After about 20 minutes, I noticed that the sound of the birds had stopped completely, leaving the woods in total silence. I stopped walking and listened hard, but I could not hear any wind or even the rustle of a single leaf. It was like someone had pushed a mute button on the entire world, and it made the hair on my neck stand up. I checked my watch and realized that it had stopped moving at exactly 10 minutes past noon. I decided to turn around and head back to my truck because the silence was starting to make me feel very nervous. But when I turned around, the trail I had just walked on was gone, replaced by thick brush and tangled vines. I stood there for a minute, trying to understand how a well-worn path could simply vanish into the green earth like that. I started to feel a creeping dread in my chest that told me I was in deep trouble. The fog rolled in from nowhere, thick and white, like a heavy blanket that dropped the visibility down to almost nothing at all. I could barely see my own hands in front of my face as I tried to push through the heavy mountain laurel. Every direction looked exactly the same in the gray light, and I realized I was wandering aimlessly through the dense trees. I tried to stay calm and find a landmark, but the forest seemed to be shifting around me. I walked for what felt like hours, but I kept passing the same lightning-struck oak tree over and over again in the mist. And no matter which way I turned or how fast I walked, that twisted black trunk always appeared right in front of me. I felt like I was walking on a giant treadmill designed by something that wanted to keep me trapped in place. The dread was now a sharp pain in my stomach that made me want to scream for help. The shadows under the trees began to grow longer and move as if they had a life and a purpose of their own. Even though the sun was hidden by the fog, the darkness seemed to be leaking out from the cracks in the bark. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, but every time I turned my head, there was nothing there. I felt like something was following me just out of sight, waiting for me to finally give up. I started to run, pushing through the thorns that scratched my arms and tore at my expensive hiking clothes as I fled. My lungs burned with every breath of the cold, damp air, but I did not dare to slow down for a second. The trail suddenly appeared beneath my feet again, but it looked different, like it was made of dark, crushed bone instead. I followed it blindly because I didn't know what else to do in that terrifying and silent place. The trees on either side of the path began to lean in toward me, their branches reaching out like long, skeletal fingers. I felt them brush against my shoulders, and the touch was as cold as a piece of ice from a winter stream. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground, afraid that if I looked up, I would see something I couldn't forget. The forest felt alive and hungry, watching my every move with 1,000 invisible and hateful eyes. I found a small stone bridge crossing a dry creek bed that I definitely had not seen on my way into the woods. The stones were covered in a strange, glowing moss that pulsed with a faint and sickly green light in the dark. I crossed it quickly, but as soon as my boots hit the other side, the bridge crumbled into the deep sand. I was now truly cut off from the path behind me, trapped on a trail that led nowhere. Time began to distort in a way that made my head spin and my vision go blurry as I continued to walk. One minute the sky was a dim gray, and the next it was pitch black with stars that looked like tiny holes. I felt like I had been in the woods for days, but my stomach was not hungry, and I wasn't thirsty. The only thing I felt was the heavy weight of the dread pressing down on my tired shoulders. I heard a voice calling my name from deep within the trees, a soft whisper that sounded exactly like my mother's voice. I almost ran toward it before I remembered that my mother has been dead for over 10 years now in the city. The voice started to laugh, a dry and raspy sound that echoed through the fog until it filled my whole head. I covered my ears and kept moving, refusing to look back at the shadows behind the trees. The trail led me to a small clearing where I saw a ranger outpost sitting perfectly still in the middle of the grass. It looked old and abandoned, with boards nailed over the windows and the front door hanging open by a single hinge. I felt a small spark of hope, thinking I might find a radio or at least a place to hide. I walked toward it, but the grass felt like it was trying to trip me. I stepped inside the cabin and the air was thick with the smell of old paper and something that smelled like rotting meat. There was a desk in the corner with a logbook lying open, its pages fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. I looked at the last entry and felt my blood turn to ice as I read my own name. It said I had checked in 50 years ago and never checked out of the park. I dropped the book and backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape a cage. The walls of the cabin began to bleed a dark, oily substance that pooled on the wooden floor around my boots. I turned to run back out the door, but the opening was gone, replaced by a solid wall of rough logs. I was trapped inside the very place I thought would be my only way to safety. I felt a cold hand touch the back of my neck, and a voice whispered that I belonged to the mountain forest now. I spun around with my flashlight, but the room was empty, and the light was starting to flicker and die out. I began to kick at the walls, screaming at the top of my lungs for someone to come and save me. The cabin started to shrink, the ceiling lowering toward my head until I had to crouch down. Just as the darkness was about to swallow me, the front door suddenly reappeared, and I fell out onto the damp, cold grass. The cabin was gone, replaced by a circle of large gray stones that looked like they had been there forever. The fog was starting to lift, and I could see the faint glow of the sun rising over the ridge. I stood up and realized I was standing only 10 feet away from the main road. I ran toward the pavement, my boots pounding on the hard surface as if it were the most beautiful thing in the world. A car slowed down and the driver looked at me with a face full of confusion and a little bit of fear. I must have looked like a madman, covered in dirt and blood with my eyes wide and full of terror. He asked if I was okay, but I couldn't find the words to tell him. I got back to my truck and drove away as fast as I could, never once looking back at the trees in the mirror. When I got home, I looked in the mirror and saw that my hair had turned completely white in some places. There was a mark on my neck, a small bruise in the shape of a hand that would not go away. I felt like the forest had left a permanent stain on my soul that night. I haven't slept a full night since I came back from that trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park last week. Every time I close my eyes, I am back on that unmarked trail with the fog pressing in on my chest. I can still hear the voice of the mountain laughing at me from the shadows of my own dark bedroom. I know that I escaped the woods, but I don't think I ever really left them behind. I tried to tell my friends about it, but they just think I had a panic attack or got a little bit lost. They don't understand that the trail was not a real place, and the cabin was something much worse than wood. I see them looking at my white hair and the mark on my neck with a look of quiet pity. They think I am broken, and maybe they are right about that after what I saw there. I did some research online and found that dozens of people have gone missing in that exact area over the last 50 years. None of them were ever found. Not even a shoe or a scrap of clothing was left behind in the brush. I wonder if they are all still walking that endless trail in the fog, passing the same black oak tree. I wonder if they found the cabin and didn't get out in time like I did. The mark on my neck has started to itch and glow with a faint green light when the room gets very dark. I can feel something moving under my skin, like a small root growing deep into my muscles and my tired bones. I'm afraid to go to a doctor because I don't think they have a cure for a mountain curse. I feel like I am slowly turning into something that belongs to the trees and fog. I sold all of my hiking gear yesterday, throwing the boots and the backpack into the dumpster behind my apartment building in the city. I never want to see a trail or a forest again for as long as I am still drawing breath. I stay in the city where the lights are bright and the pavement is solid under my feet at night, but even here, I can smell the damp earth and the scent of rotting leaves. I woke up this morning and found a pile of wet, rotting leaves on my pillow, even though my bedroom door and windows are locked. They smell exactly like that cabin, and the cold coming off them is making my skin crawl. I tried to clean them up, but the damp stain on the fabric just keeps growing like a bruise. I don't think I'm alone in this apartment anymore. I can hear the scratching at my front door right now, the sound of dry branches rubbing against the wood in the hall. There is no tree outside my apartment, just a brick wall and a busy street full of loud cars. The fog is starting to leak in under the doorframe, thick and white and smelling of old bone. I know that my time is finally up, and the mountain has come to collect. My kitchen light just blew out, and the only thing I can see is the glow from my laptop screen on the wall. I'm typing this with shaking hands because the temperature in here just dropped until I can see my own breath. Don't go looking for the quiet spots off the main trails because that's where the air gets thick. Once you breathe it in, you belong to the mountain, and it will eventually come to collect. The shadow in the corner of my room is stretching out, and it has the shape of something with massive, jagged antlers. I can hear the sound of wet hooves clicking on my hardwood floor, coming closer to the bed every time I blink. I tried to stand up and run for the balcony, but my legs feel like they've been turned into lead. It's just standing there in the dark, waiting for the last of the light to die. The fog is pouring into my bedroom now, and it's so cold that it feels like my skin is starting to freeze. I can hear a low, vibrating hum coming from the chest of whatever is standing at the foot of my bed. If you're reading this, and you're planning a trip to the Smokies, stay on the asphalt, and don't get curious. That lost trail isn't a shortcut. It's a trap designed to peel you away from the world of people. Once the forest marks you, there isn't a lock or a wall in the city that can keep the fog out. Wish I had never stepped off the main path.